Hello, today we'll be studying character in literature, and we'll be looking at how authors develop a character in a story. That's called characterization, and what it involves, at least in part, is whether a character, main character usually, stays the same or changes because of his or her circumstances and experiences. So a changed character is called a dynamic character, while a character that stays the same is called a static character. All right, so let's start with dynamic. A dynamic character is a character who changes as the story moves forward because of his or her experiences. So this would be like someone who goes through a trying or troubling time. Maybe at first this person was selfish, self-centered, and as a result of the experiences, however, maybe he begins to appreciate his life more at the end and is more grateful. So he changes. He would be dynamic. A static character, on the other hand, is one who stays the same as the story moves forward, even if that character experienced something very profound or influential or impacting. So I'm going to show you a few examples of these in writing, and then I'm going to have you guys take a quiz, and I want you're going to actually write your answers, but you'll see what I mean. So in A Christmas Carol, some of these stories you may recognize, others you may not. So if you don't, just bear with me. So A Christmas Carol is a classic story, and it's in the story. There's the main character is named Ebenezer Scrooge, and he begins as kind of this really self-centered, cheap, miserly, selfish person. But as a result of his experiences, where three ghosts end up visiting him: the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas future, and they all show him what his life was like in the past, what it's like now, and what it will be like in the future because of his behavior. So he sees that all of his actions have led to just horrible consequences, and as a result, he changes and ends up becoming this this very generous, happy, and joyful man. So he'd be a dynamic character because he changes. Star Wars might be a little more familiar to you. Anakin Skywalker begins as a really innocent kid, but because his princess, the girl he loves, is killed, and because he just begins to be influenced by the dark side, he turns from that innocent boy to a vengeful Darth Vader. So here are some examples of static characters. These are characters who stay the same. You may not recognize these characters, but I'll try to explain a little bit. In the Bourne series, Jason Bourne, especially in the Bourne Ultimatum, his character doesn't change. Now, his wife is killed in the story while they're in a getaway car trying to escape. But even though that is a really difficult thing, it doesn't change his motivations or his desires. His goal is to try to discover his identity, where he comes from. So in the TV show Monk, this is an older show now, but a character, he's really germophobic, very fearful of everything, and that doesn't change throughout the series. He has small examples of what look like change, but really he doesn't change his fears and outlook on the world. And just a note here, just because a character is dynamic doesn't mean it's a good thing. Or rather, it doesn't make it better than a static character. So a dynamic character can move from better to worse, just as Anakin Skywalker did, or a person who goes from generous to selfish. But in the same way, a static character can actually be better than dynamic, in that if the static character is very moral or maybe committed to her goals, then despite what's happening around that character stays honorable. So that it's not like one type of character is better than another. Okay, here are a few other examples. I want you to tell me what kind of character this is, if you can. So it says, Bert, a bumbling salesman, never takes the time to organize his files, properly record his sales, or follow up with customers. Finally, his boss gets fed up and fires him. Bert struggles for 2 months to find a new sales position. During that time, his car is repossessed for non-payment and he maxes out his credit cards. Bert finally finds a new sales position, but before a week passes, he is called into a conference with his new boss. Bert is informed he must get organized or he'll be fired. A week later, the new boss fires Bert after he fails to follow up with an important customer. All right, what do you think Bert is? What kind of character is Bert? Is he static or dynamic? I'm going to give you a moment. And if you said that he is static, then you're right. Bert begins as a disorganized, irresponsible worker and is fired from his job. And after getting a new job, he ends up acting the same way and gets fired again. So he stays the same. He doesn't change. And as a result, he's static. Okay, look at this next one. This is a story called Raymond's Run. In the beginning, Squeaky is really focused on her own training as a runner. So look at this line. She says, and it occurs to me that Raymond would make a very fine runner. And I'm smiling to beat the band, because if I've lost this race, or if me and Gretchen tied, or even if I've won, I can always retire as a runner and begin a whole new career as a coach with Raymond as my champion. So in this case, if she was self-centered at first and focused solely on her own running, she begins to see that there's more to life than taking care of herself, and so she begins to care for her brother instead. So she would be dynamic. Okay, at this time, let's go ahead and look at some examples. I want you to use the document that I attached to Classroom, and I want you to write down whether each character here is static or dynamic. Or rather, I don't think I'm going to have you write them down, but I do want you just to name what you think they are, and I'll out loud even, or in your mind, and I will go over what each of these is after each of them. Okay, so let's start here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here's Ebenezer Scrooge, and since we talked about this one already, you might know already that he is, say it, he is dynamic. He changes from self-centered and miserly to giving and generous. Second one, this is Cinderella. And Cinderella, this could be a little confusing. She actually is static because she doesn't change. She changes from a very impoverished or poor-looking woman to a wealthy one for a time, and then becomes a princess. But that's not her character. Her character is what needs to change for her to be dynamic. So she stays humble and kind and generous. So she's static. And here's the wicked stepmother. What do you think? And if you said static, you would be right. She stays mean pretty much throughout the whole story. Okay, here's the next one. Okay, here's Anakin Skywalker. You know that from what we said that he is. Okay, if you said he is dynamic, you're right. He changes from innocent boy to an increasingly evil young man, then to Darth Vader. All right, here's everyone's favorite ogre, Shrek. What do you think? Okay, if you said dynamic, then you're right. And the reason is that he's very selfish at the beginning. He wants to stay alone, doesn't want anybody around or to share his life with anyone. But by the end, through Donkey's actions and his love for Fiona, he is more inviting and caring. So he's dynamic. And of course, Donkey, what do you think? Okay, Donkey is static. Donkey begins as a kind of happy-go-lucky, carefree animal to stay that way throughout the story. He doesn't change. All right, and then Lord Farquaad. Tell me what you think. Okay, Lord Farquaad, if you know him, is static. He doesn't change. He starts evil and he dies evil, if you saw the movie. Okay, we said this one already. Jason Bourne. What do you remember? Okay, he is static. He doesn't change. His goal is to become aware of his own identity. So he's static. Here is Katniss Everdeen. If you remember the Hunger Games, you would know that Katniss. This is a little more controversial. You might disagree with me here, but I actually think that she's static, and the reason for that is, despite her glory in winning the Hunger Games, she doesn't stop caring for her family and those closest to her. So she doesn't like become evil or become this really selfish person. She stays sort of selfless. Okay, hey Mitch, if you saw the story, you tell me what you think. If you know the story, then you know that Haymitch is dynamic. He starts as a really he's a drunkard, really. He starts as a selfish, kind of self-centered guy who doesn't believe in anybody, not even himself. But by the end, he has a great passion to see Katniss win the games, and he turns more generous and helpful toward her. So he is definitely dynamic. All right, the Hulk. Now this one's a little tricky, so tell me what you think. Okay, Hulk, I'm thinking is static, and the reason I say that it is tricky because his physical body and his personality changes when he turns from Bruce Banner to the Hulk, but he doesn't change from in the sense that the scientist Bruce Banner doesn't change from um, like easygoing and calm to then another type of Bruce Banner, nor does the Hulk change from really, I guess, angry to less angry. You could make an argument that he is dynamic if you watch the Avengers series, because he begins to actually he does. There's a combination of Hulk and Bruce Banner in the end where they are. There's a Hulk who's sort of more intelligent and calmer. So I guess if you think of the Avengers version, he is dynamic. Okay, Captain America. Tell me what you think. Captain America. Although he grows more cynical through the story, he still is the good, upstanding guy that will save the day when necessary. So I would call him more static than dynamic. Although you could probably make a case for dynamic too. All right, here's Simba. What do you think from The Lion King? Simba is dynamic. Simba ends up going from kind of a Hakuna Matata attitude to one who really takes responsibility for his pride and helps them. Okay, Woody. What do you think? Woody is dynamic. Woody ends up hating and being kind of self-centered at first, not wanting to share his master with Buzz, really Buzz. But then later he does. Okay, that's all the time we have because I only have a minute left. So I want you to do this now on the Google Doc that's posted on Classroom. I want you to go ahead and read one of the two stories I posted, and then you're going to write whether you think the character in the story is static or dynamic and why you think so. And then in the after that, I want you to write your own story in which you create a character who is either static or dynamic, and then you have to explain why you think that character is static or dynamic. All right? Good luck.